February 1945. A frontline position near Prüm, Germany. Inside a concrete bunker, bright fluorescent bulbs hum over a wooden table. A row of infantrymen stand before the light, blinking against the glare while an officer traces a line across a map. Outside the reinforced door, the European night is total, heavy, and freezing. The men look at the map, then at the bright bulbs, their pupils shrunk to tiny pinpricks. In 10 minutes, these men will step through that door into absolute pitch blackness, completely unable to see the mud beneath their boots, the white tape marking the safe path, or the enemy waiting in the snow. General George S. Patton will soon discover exactly what happens when a commander treats the basic laws of human biology as an unnecessary luxury, and his response will permanently change how his army fights after the sun goes down. This is the story of what happened when a company commander ignored military science and forced his own men to walk blind into a lethal German trap near the Siegfried Line. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories that show what happened when a man's rank exceeded his judgment. Sergeant Leon Marsh was 26 years old. He came from Seattle, Washington, and served with the 90th Infantry Division. Before the war, Marsh worked as a timber cruiser in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, a job that required navigating thick, pitch-black woods by sound, touch, and memory. He had enlisted the day after Pearl Harbor. On the Western Front, he had already led 12 separate night combat patrols with absolute precision, never losing a single man to the darkness. Marsh survived the bloody hedgerow fighting in Normandy and the freezing mud of the Saar region by respecting the basic mechanics of infantry survival. He knew that the human eye was a delicate piece of machinery, one that required patience and time to adapt to the dark before entering no man's land. On this freezing February night, he stood inside the company command post, staring at the map with eyes that were already ruined by the glare of the room. Captain Marcus Vail was 31 years old. He came from Dallas, Texas, and was the commander of the infantry company. Vail was a man born into wealth, the son of an oil executive who had used political connections to secure an accelerated commission before shipping overseas. He wore a clean, tailored wool overcoat, and his leather boots were polished to a mirror shine despite the thick mud outside the bunker door. Vail viewed the war as a series of corporate schedules that needed to be met at all costs, and he dismissed tactical doctrine as bureaucratic fluff meant for weaker men. He openly told his junior officers that speed was the only metric that mattered, often stating that aggressiveness could overcome any physical obstacle on the battlefield. To Vail, the Army training manuals were full of useless superstitions designed by old men who had never seen real combat. He stood by the wooden table, tapping his wristwatch impatiently as he prepared to send his men out into the freezing German night. The winter of 1945 was a brutal, grinding period for the American forces pushing against the western borders of the German Reich. The Allied advance had slowed down significantly after the fast race across France during the previous summer. Now, the troops faced the Siegfried Line, a massive system of concrete bunkers, pillboxes, dragon's teeth anti-tank obstacles, and deep minefields that blocked the path into the German heartland. The terrain around Prüm was rugged and heavily forested, filled with sharp ridges and deep ravines that made armored maneuvers nearly impossible. The weather was a constant enemy, bringing freezing temperatures, heavy snowstorms, and thick mud that chilled the men to the bone, because the day fighting was so hazardous due to entrenched German machine guns and artillery. Night operations became the standard method for gathering intelligence, capturing prisoners, and seizing key terrain features before the main attacks began. In this chaotic environment, small infantry units were often isolated in forward positions, cut off from immediate support, and left to rely entirely on the judgment of their local company commanders. Many high-ranking officers at division headquarters were under immense pressure from the Supreme Command to maintain a rapid offensive schedule, which meant that tactical details were sometimes overlooked. Some battalion commanders let standard safety protocols slide in the rush to meet these aggressive timelines. believing that speed was more important than cautious preparation. They allowed night patrols to go out without proper equipment, without thorough reconnaissance, and without checking the physical readiness of the men. This created a dangerous culture where basic infantry fieldcraft was treated as an obstacle to victory rather than the foundation of it. The front line became a place where small mistakes led to catastrophic ambushes in the dark. Sergeant Marsh looked up from the map table, his eyes straining against the glare of the electric bulbs hanging from the ceiling. He looked at the company commander, whose face was clear and sharp under the illumination. Marsh cleared his throat. "Captain, we need 30 minutes out here in the bunker entryway before we cross the line of departure. The men have been sitting under these bright lights for an hour. Their eyes aren't adjusted to the dark. If we step out there right now, we are functionally blind. We won't be able to see the white tape on the path, let alone a German listening post." Captain Vale did not look up from his papers. He adjusted his wool coat and tapped the face of his silver watch. "We don't have 30 minutes to waste sitting in a dark room, Sergeant. The battalion attack plan depends on your patrol. Securing that ridge line by midnight. You have your route and you have your orders. Move out." The company executive officer, an older lieutenant who had served in North Africa, stepped forward from the corner of the room. He pointed toward a wooden crate near the doorway. "Captain, the training manuals are very specific about this. Human eyes take at least half an hour to build up night vision. We have red-filtered lenses for the flashlights and the lamps right here. We could have dimmed the room before the briefing. It is basic combat science." Vale turned his head quickly, his mouth hardening into a straight line. "I don't run my company based on training school fairy tales and superstitions from books. My men need to see the map clearly to know where they are going, not sit around in a dark room holding hands. This patrol is already behind schedule because the ammunition draw took too long. A recidivism movement is what wins battles, not waiting around for your eyes to change color. Sergeant Marsh, take your squad and get out the door. That is a direct order." Marsh stared at the captain for a long moment, his hands clenched tightly at his sides. He knew what the total darkness outside would do to his men. He knew they would step over the threshold and see nothing but black ink for 20 minutes. "Yes, sir," Marsh said. The patrol stepped out into the freezing German night at exactly 10 minutes past 10 o'clock. Within 60 seconds, the lead scout stumbled over a frozen root, his boots crashing into the brush. The men walked forward with their hands outstretched, unable to find the white tape markers that guided them through the American minefield. 5 minutes later, the point man walked directly into a logs-unearthed German listening post that he never saw. A single German machine pistol fired 3 short bursts at point-blank range. In the total darkness, the American soldiers fired wildly at the flashes of light, hitting their own men in the confusion. 5 soldiers were killed in less than 3 minutes of chaotic close-quarters fighting, because they could not see the targets they were trying to shoot. The battalion medical officer brought the survivors back to the aid station before dawn. The report detailing the total failure of the patrol and the 5 dead infantrymen reached Patton within the hour. Patton arrived within the hour. His open-top jeep pulled up directly to the company command post. The cold wind whipping across the snow, the 4 silver stars on his helmet caught the dull morning light, and the twin ivory-handled revolvers rested securely on his hips. He stepped out of the vehicle and walked into the bunker, unannounced, his boots striking the concrete floor with rhythmic precision. The entire room snapped to attention instantly, the ambient noise dying out until only the hum of the fluorescent bulbs remained. Patton did not raise his voice, but his cold presence filled the tight space completely. Patton looked directly at the company commander. "Captain Vale, stand up." Vale stood up quickly, his polished leather boots clicking together as he smoothed the front of his tailored wool coat. "Yes, General." Patton looked at the map on the table, then looked back at the officer. "You sent a combat reconnaissance patrol out into no man's land last night, did you not?" Vale nodded, his voice steady. "I did, sir. They were assigned to secure the ridge line by midnight to support the battalion offensive." Patton stepped closer, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked at the bright bulbs hanging above the table. You briefed the men inside this room under these specific lights, and then you ordered them out into the dark immediately. Vale cleared his throat, adjusting his posture. That is correct, General. We were well behind our operational schedule. The men needed to see the map clearly to understand their objectives, and I could not afford to waste 30 minutes sitting around in a dark room doing nothing. Aggressive movement takes precedence over training school theories. Patton studied him for a long moment, his face turning into a mask of pure stone. You believe the basic biological mechanics of the human eye are a theory, Captain. You believe that darkness is an opinion that can be overcome by an administrative schedule. Vale remained silent, his eyes fixed on the wall behind the general. Patton spoke, his voice low, sharp, and perfectly clear. Your training manuals are not full of folktales, Captain. They are full of the blood of men who died, learning how the human body functions under stress. It takes 30 minutes for a soldier's eyes to adjust from an illuminated bunker to total darkness. This is not a matter of opinion or military hierarchy. This is science. This is biology. You sat in a warm room under electric glare and allowed your own rank to exceed your common judgment. You took 12 American infantrymen, men who had survived the hedgerows of Normandy through discipline and fieldcraft, and you made them functionally blind before you pushed them into the freezing mud. Sergeant Marsh knew how to navigate the night because he respects the reality of the battlefield. He asked you for the time to let his squad adapt to the dark, and you denied him because you were worried about a clock. Your men did not die because the enemy was superior. They died because they could not see the white tape, they could not see the terrain, and they could not see the German soldiers who were waiting for them in the shadows. You sent blind men to do the work of soldiers. You have a choice right now, Captain. You can either step outside and demonstrate your superior aggressive theories under my direct supervision, or you will face the immediate consequences of your criminal negligence. Patton turned away from the captain and looked toward the military police, standing by the bunker entrance. He gave a sharp nod, and the guards moved forward instantly. They stripped Vale of his command insignia right there, in front of the remaining members of the company staff, the cold metal pins hitting the concrete floor with a sharp metallic ping. The guards then led the captain out into the pitch-black night, forcing him away from the warmth of the command post and onto the back of an open-top utility vehicle. Vale sat shivering in the freezing wind as the vehicle drove to a forward artillery observation post located directly on the ridgeline. The guards escorted him into a small, deep dugout that had been completely blacked out to prevent German gunners from spotting the position. There were no candles, no flashlights, and no heaters. For the next 30 minutes, Vale was forced to sit in the absolute dark, listening to the distant rumble of mortar fire and the whistling of the wind through the shattered pine trees. He could smell the damp earth and the sulfur from old shell craters, his hands freezing inside his uniform as his eyes struggled to find any trace of light in the ink-black room. The artillery observers watched him silently from the shadows, ensuring the disgraced officer remained in the dark for every single second of the required time. Sergeant Marsh remained with the 90th Infantry Division through the end of the European conflict, leading several more successful reconnaissance missions across the Rhine and into central Germany. After his discharge in late 1945, he returned home to Seattle, Washington, and went back to his pre-war life as a timber cruiser in the heavy forests of the Pacific Northwest. He lived a quiet, private life, rarely speaking to his family about the details of his combat service, though he kept his field compass on his desk until the day he died. Marsh passed away peacefully at his home in the summer of 1988 at the age of 69. Captain Vale was officially reassigned to a low-level administrative supply depot far behind the active front lines, where he spent the remainder of the war managing cargo manifests and equipment crates under strict supervision. He returned to Dallas, Texas in 1946 and eventually took over his family oil enterprise, but his military record permanently blocked him from achieving any notable social or political advancements within his community. He remained deeply bitter about his relief from command, often complaining to his close business associates that his career had been ruined by bureaucratic technicalities. Vale died of a heart ailment in 1974. General Patton did not include the specific details of the company incident in his official diaries, nor did he mention Vale by name in his letters home to his family. He did, however, add a handwritten note to the 3rd Army Tactical Training Circular later that month regarding the execution of forward reconnaissance. He wrote that an officer who fails to protect the physical capabilities of his men is far more dangerous than an aggressive enemy. Some historians have argued that Patton's public degradation and sudden relief of an infantry company commander over dark adaptation was an unnecessary overreaction during a critical phase of the winter offensive. They claim that tactical friction, tight battle schedules, and the immense pressure from the Supreme Command frequently forced forward officers to make difficult compromises regarding training protocols. Others have argued the opposite, insisting that the general's zero-tolerance enforcement of combat biology was entirely justified to halt a growing culture of negligence among junior leaders. What is certain is that the immediate issuance of the mandatory 30-minute dark adaptation protocol saved countless American scouts from walking blind into deadly ambushes during the final push across the German border. If you had been in Patton's position, would you have done the same, or would you have simply issued a formal warning to the company commander instead of relieving him publicly? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more stories about what happened when a man's rank exceeded his judgment, make sure to subscribe.